we'll get not very far into the general prologue today. For a lot of people, Chaucer's the beginning of English literature. In other words, everything we've done up until this point, it's kind of like preface. Okay? Why? Because Chaucer, anybody can read. It might be a little hard, but not anybody can read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Notice we did not read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in the Middle English dialect it is written in, because it's really hard. Okay? But Chaucer you can. And that's because Chaucer's dialect is what ultimately develops into standard modern English. Okay? Chaucer's dates, he dies in 1400. We're not exactly sure when he's born, but it's probably around 1343. I've seen other dates given up to 1346. Okay? In 1360, he was involved in the 100 Years' War. He was captured by the French, and he was ransomed by the king of England. That is, the king of England paid the ransom, okay, for Chaucer.
That's nice.
And the way most people interpret that is there had to be something special about him, because he was only 16 or 17 years old then. Okay? Probably while he was over there that he came into contact with some French works. Your introduction mentions Guillaume de Larisse's, not Name of the Rose, that's Umberto Eco. It's right there in the book. And my mind is completely drawing a blank. Romance of the Rose. I knew it had a rose in it. We know Chaucer knew French, Latin, and Italian, because he translates from all three languages. Okay? These are his major works. He's got a whole bunch of others. Right? But these are his major works. Book of the Duchess. The Duchess there is John of Gaunt's wife, Blanche, who died. And so he writes a very long kind of funereal poem about her to kind of console John of Gaunt. Pretty much the second most powerful person in England at that time. He then writes The House of Fame, 1377. I don't have it up here, but somewhere in this period is The Legend of Good Women. I don't know why that's not included in the book. Parliament of Fowls, which is exactly what it sounds like. A bunch of birds getting together and having a parliament. Having a meeting. Okay? It's about Valentine's Day, by the way. Troilus and Cressida, which is his first real major work. That is, a lot of Chaucer courses, graduate courses and stuff, you'll get these talked about. But you focus on Troilus and Cressida and Canterbury Tales. Okay? Why? Because Troilus and Cressida is finished. These are also finished, but these are often taken to be the word that we no longer use. Essays, trials in the craft of writing. And this shows Chaucer the master. Okay? So Chaucer writes Troilus and Cressida. Shakespeare has Troilus and Cressida. Another medieval writer, Robert Henderson, has Troilus and Cressida. Okay? Or Troilus and Cressid. Okay? And then he writes that around 1385. And then sometime around 1385, he's also begun the Canterbury Tales. And he dies in 1400. So the Canterbury Tales stops then. The question becomes, is the Canterbury Tales finished? We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay? Troilus, he's got sources for a lot of this material. That is, he's not just coming up with this on his own. Boccaccio's Il Filostrato is a source for Troilus and Cressida. Parts of Troilus and Cressida, he really expands. Other parts he shortens, takes out, and such. The Decameron by Boccaccio is kind of a model for Canterbury Tales. The Decameron means 100 tales, or 100 nights if you want. Okay? And what Boccaccio does in the Decameron is you got the plague ravaging Europe, And so he has a group of knights and ladies go off from the city to a villa out in the country, and they're going to spend 10 nights with 10 people, each telling a tale every night. So 10 tale tellers by 10 nights, 100 stories. Okay? That's the frame, that's the foundation that the stories are built around. So Chaucer takes that idea of having multiple people tell multiple tales, and he kind of says, you know, Boccaccio, I can outdo you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do 120 tales. How do we know? Because in the general prologue, we're going to have Chaucer, after the introduction, talk about sitting at the Tabard Inn in Southwark. Southwark is still there in London. You can go to Southwark, you can go to Southwark Cathedral, which Chaucer would have been to. Okay? The Tabard Inn is no longer there. But he talks about sitting at the Tabard Inn, and in came 29 pilgrims. Okay? He attaches himself to their group, so there will be 30 pilgrims heading to Canterbury, 30 pilgrims coming back. And the host, that is the innkeeper, the Tabard Inn, we'll see, he will propose a game if you want. He's going to say, I'll go with you. He's not going to be one of the pilgrims per se. I will go with you, and you'll each tell 2 tales going and 2 tales coming. So 30 times 2 times 2 is 120 tales. I will determine who told the best tale. And we will all pay for that person's journey. Okay? That is, when we get back, we'll all pitch in to defray his costs or her costs. And if anybody disagrees with my judgment, that person will pay the other person's full fare. And they all go, cool, great idea. So you have the host and 30 pilgrims. The 30 pilgrims will tell 2 tales going and coming, 120 tales. We only have 24. That is, we don't even get a tale from every tale teller.
Is it because he died before he was able
Well,
to...
yeah, I mean, he did die, so we do. That's one reason.
Or is it because, we lost some of the tales?
It's possible. We do have 55 complete manuscripts, or nearly so. Or nearly so, meaning missing only 1 or 2 tales. Okay? There's 28 partial manuscripts. That is, some 28 manuscripts that contain some of the tales, but not most of them. Okay? One of the things that means is the Canterbury Tales were really popular for there to be that many copies. Okay? Well, because there are only 24 tales, almost everybody has taken the Canterbury Tales to be incomplete. It's an unfinished work. My Chaucer professor, when I was a doctoral student, a guy by the name of Charlie Moorman, or Charles Moorman, he was getting on in years by the time I had him. He was the student of this guy, okay? Which I'll talk about in a moment. Moorman argued, and he argued this not only in class, but he argued it in print. The Canterbury Tales is complete. It is finished. It is exactly what Chaucer wanted it to be. And he did that on the basis of reading and paying attention to what happens within the progress of the stories. Because it begins with the host, a guy named Harry Bailey, a real person, by the way. We actually know he lived and ran the Tabard Inn. Harry Bailey saying at the beginning, you'll each tell 2 tales, blah, 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 blah. Well, you get about 3/4 of the way through, and Harry Bailey says something to the effect of, now that we are half done. But they haven't told 60 tales. In fact, they've not reached Canterbury. But he says, now that we're half done. I think I'm pretty sure that's what he says. Moorman argued that's Chaucer telling us, his readers, there's no way in God's green earth I'm getting 120 tales. I'm old and I just don't have it in me anymore. So you're going to get a few more. We've had 12, you're going to get 12 more. And then when we get to the second to the last tale is told by the poor parson. When he's introduced, Harry Bailey says, we have one more to go. And then we're done. Moorman argued, again, that's Chaucer saying, this baby's done. One more tale, I'm complete. I'm not going to out Boccaccio, in other words. Okay? So, where are they going? They're going to Canterbury. Why? What's so special about Canterbury? Why Canterbury? Why not London? Why not, well, they're in London. That's a stupid question. Why not Oxford? Why not Cambridge?
That's a holy site.
Why is it a holy site?
It's got a saint buried there, right?
A saint was killed there. He was made a saint after that. Okay? Thomas à Becket. Okay? Thomas à Becket was the Archbishop of Canterbury. So now we need to back up a little bit. If you remember when we began discussion of the Middle Ages, I have written over here Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, and Henry II's dates were 1154 to 1189. I think I also wrote up there Thomas Becket. Why? Because Henry II and Becket were great friends. They were drinking buddies. They were whoring buddies. That is, they'd go to the whorehouses together. Okay? They did everything together. Yeah, even after he was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine and all that kind of stuff. So, the Archbishop of Canterbury dies. And because of the way it's set up in England, the king gets to name the next archbishop. Well, the king's having some troubles at the time. He's having troubles with France. Okay? And he has to raise money. He's having some troubles with the church, because the church isn't supporting him the way he would like the church to be. And the light bulb, metaphorically, goes off in his mind. And he says, I know what I'll do. I'll make my best friend Archbishop of Canterbury. He'll do what I want. So he talks to Becket, and Becket says, don't do it. Don't do it. If you make me Archbishop of Canterbury, I will really become the Archbishop of Canterbury. In other words, I'll change. I won't be your drinking, whoring buddy with you anymore. I will be like a archbishop ought to be. But Henry does it anyways. And Becket immediately starts to oppose Henry's will. He eventually has to flee, runs off to France, to Avignon. This is at a time in European history when you have two popes. You got a pope in Avignon, France, and you have a pope in Rome. Okay? And the pope in Avignon tells him, you got to go back. Yeah, but I might die. Yeah, but okay. You say you're a Christian, you got to take up that cross, you got to die. You got to go back. So he goes back. And he tries to placate Henry, doesn't work. And late in December 26th, I don't remember if your text mentions the year. In 1186. Drawing a blank on the exact year. Late December, late in Henry's reign. No, it's not 1186 because Becket's made at night, I think, around 89. So it's got to be in the late 70s, I believe. Henry, in a drunken stupor, at the Palace of Westminster, and I think it's Westminster, in London, says, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" And 3 of his knights get on their horses, and they ride from London to Canterbury. It's about 80 miles, if I remember right. Becket receives word that they're coming. Becket goes, this is 28th or 29th of December. Becket goes to the cathedral, and he starts praying, and I think serving Mass, at the altar. And the knights burst into the cathedral and slaughter him at the altar. If you go to Canterbury Cathedral today, where the altar is today is not the same altar that was used in Becket's day. Different area. But where Becket was slain, they have a shrine, okay, to him with this weird sculpture. I mean, it's totally modern avant-garde art. It's really ugly. But that's where Becket was killed, okay? Word gets back to Henry that that's what his knights did. And he's kind of like, I didn't mean it. I didn't really want him dead, okay? And Henry does penance. He rides to Canterbury, and when he reaches the city limits, the walls of the city, and I've been to Canterbury, and the wall of the city is about 1 mile, 2 miles, maybe not that far, from the cathedral. He gets off his horse and crawls on hands and knees from the wall to the cathedral as a mark of penance. Okay? And Becket is canonized a saint. I think it is 11 years later. It's one of the shortest periods of canonization in the medieval church. Why? Because people start praying to him immediately. And according to the traditions of the church, he starts doing miracles. I mean, their prayers are answered, all that kind of stuff. Okay? This is why they're going to Canterbury. There are other pilgrimage sites in England also. Okay, a couple other things. I mentioned the manuscripts. You've got an image, you've got 2 images in here from the Ellesmere manuscript, okay, which is in California, Huntington Library. There are 2 really, really good manuscripts, both written or copied by the same person. We know the name of the scribe. Okay? The Ellesmere and the other one's called the Hingert. Hingert. It's in Wales. This one is usually taken to be the better of the 2, though it's got problems that the Hingert doesn't, but the Hingert is missing one story that Ellesmere has. Okay? So when this one has errors, the errors are fixed from this one, and when this one doesn't have a story, the others come from that. Okay, one other thing. I mentioned Lumiansky. R.M. Lumiansky was an early 20th century Chaucer / Middle English scholar, along with another guy named George Lyman Kittredge. They both taught at Harvard and Yale, I believe. Both did a lot on Chaucer, Answer Down in the Green Knight, and other medieval works. Lumiansky wrote a very, very famous book, really outdated, called Of Sundry Folk.
Sundry.
Because there's a line in the general prologue that is mentions of sundry folk. Lumiansky was Moorman's professor. Okay? Lumiansky, Kittredge, and there's one other guy who I can't think of. They were like the holy trinity of medieval scholars. Right? So we're going to talk about the Of Sundry Folk in a moment. Let's begin the general prologue. So it begins with a really, really long adverbial phrase. Adverbial phrase. It's a phrase of time. This one begins, Juan la Prioress sota, and ends, Van longen folk togon on pilgrimages. It's an 11-line phrase. It's all saying when, then. Okay? So, more or less in the Middle English. Juan dat really with his shore sota, the dracht of Merch hath Persa Tolerota, and bad that Adri Vine and switch liqueur, of which virtue engendered is the fluor. One zephyr is eke with the sweat of breath, in spirit hot in every halt and hath. The tender croppus and the young isana, hot in the ram his have course irona. And smalle fooles maken melodia, that slepen o'er the nicht with open ear. So pricketh him nature in her courages, than longen folk to go on pilgrimages. And Polymer is for to saken strange strandes, to ferne halwas, cuth in sundry landes. So, when do people decide to go on pilgrimage? When the weather gets nice. Okay? When April, with his sweet showers, pierces the drought of March to the root, and bathes every vein in such liquid, vein like plant veins, okay, in such liquid, of which virtue engendered is the flower. Then, when Zephyr, the west wind, also with his sweet breath and spirit hath, what's he getting at? Okay, a little bit more than that.
Summer.
Why do people want to get out?
Because there's nothing to do.
Okay, take where we are latitudinally and take England.
There's no ice.
Bingo. The weather's getting nice. England's latitude is like Newfoundland, so north of Maine. Winters are what? Cold, harsh. But when the spring rains come, flowers are blooming, plants are, growing and everything. We experience it here. February is usually a crappy month in Murfreesboro. It's usually dark, cloudy, cold. And what happens when you get that first 60, 70 degree day in late February or early March? People are walking around in t-shirts and shorts.
And it's humid as.
Well, it's not humid then, but it gets a little bit later. So, people are suffering cabin fever. They want to get out. Yeah. And they do what? They go on holy pilgrimages. I think there's a little more involved. Okay? So, he says people go from every shire's end of England to Canterbury. They wend, they travel, they turn. Why? The holy blissful martyr for to seek. There it is. Killed on 29 December 1170.
What was that date again?
Footnote. Footnote number 4.
Thank you.
All right. Why? Because he can help them when they were sick. So, befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the Tabard as I lay, it just so happened that in April, while I was at the Tabard, ready to go on my pilgrimage with full devout courage, that is heart, what? At night into that hostelry, 29 in a company of sundry folk by adventure y falla. By adventure y falla means by chance came together. They weren't all traveling together initially. No. It's like a couple come in, one comes in. 29 people that night all arrive at the Tabard. Why? They're getting ready to go to Stratford. The Tabard is on the road that you could follow out of London. Today you can still do this. You could follow it out of London and go straight to Canterbury. Okay? Of sundry folk. Now your gloss tells you various. What kind of sundry folk? Well, Chaucer's going to tell us. He's going to tell us a little something about every person in this group. Okay? And why are they sundry folk? Because we have people from the highest level of society to the lowest level of society. You have represented, and this isn't, this idea of the three estates is not really emphasized a lot more in the criticism of Chaucer. It's kind of taken to be out of date. I still think it applies. You have what are called the three estates, okay, of medieval society. The nobility, is the first estate. They're the highest. The clergy, they're the next. The commoners. Okay? Another way to put these, those who fight, those who pray, those who work. Right? So, Chaucer says, they came in, rooms were made ready, stables were made ready for their animals. Everyone came in for their fellowship, line 32. And he says, but before I go on, let me tell you a little bit about each of them. While I have time and space, before that I farther in this tale go, pace, to tell you all the condition of each of them. The condition, your gloss tells you their character and their estate. Okay? What else? Also, of what degree, that is, what rank or level in society, and how they were dressed. So what's he going to tell us? Kind of name, rank, and serial number. He's going to tell us where they fit on the social status, okay, of what estate, which of these they belong to, okay, and how they appear, what they're dressed like. And he begins with a knight. Why begin with a knight?
Because aristocrats.
Top level. Start at the top. Start at the top. Is he going to work all the way down to the bottom then? No. But he's going to start at the top. Why? Because this guy's a knight. You don't want to anger the soldier. The guy with the big gun, so to speak. Okay? So we get a long description of the knight, who was a worthy man. That from the time that he first began to write it out, he loved chivalry. That is, from the time he first loved or lived or learned to ride, he loved chivalry. The whole knightly code, the whole knightly honor thing. Truth and honor, freedom and courtesy. What is the knight in the modern Marvel universe?
The superhero, right?
He's Captain America. He is Captain America. He's Captain England. Okay? He fits the part perfectly. Notice, he loves what? Chivalry, truth, honor, freedom, courtesy, God, apple pie, and mom. You know, he's the whole 9 yards. Full worthy was he in his Lord's war, and thereto had he ridden no man farther. Nobody's ridden farther off in his Lord's wars. Well, what Lord is he talking about?
The king, right?
God. He's talking about the Crusades. Okay? As well in Christendom as in heathenness. That is, he's ridden farther out in Christian lands and in heathen lands than anybody else. And he was ever honored for his worthiness. And so, Chaucer then tells us the names of places he has fought at. Alexandria, okay. Prus, that's Prussia. In Letau, you've got glosses. You got a big long gloss on page 301 in the left-hand column. From Alessandria to Turkey. Alexandria in Egypt, Prussia, Lithuania, Russia, Granada in Spain, North Africa, Syria, Turkey, modern Turkey, Algeria, modern Turkey again, and Turkey again. Okay. This guy's really gotten around in terms of fighting.
That's pretty old.
Okay. Well, could be, but remember, he started young. From the time he could ride, he loved chivalry. So he probably started as a page. How does for a knight, what's the order? Like today, if you were to take on an apprenticeship, you start off as an apprentice,
Then it's a squire.
then you become a journeyman, then you become a master. How long are you an apprentice? Generally, about 7 years. How long are you a journeyman? About 7 years. And after you complete that, then you become a master craftsman of whatever it is you're doing. For a medieval knight, it's pretty much the same. You start off as a page. What does a page do? Polish my shoes, clean out the horse's stable, brush the horse down, and you do that for several years. That would start out 10, 11, 12 years old. Okay? Maybe a little bit younger. Then you rise to the level of a squire. What does a squire do? Helps the knight get ready for battle, that is, helps him put his armor on, keeps that armor spiffy and shining. Okay?
Train.
You train, you learn how to fight, you learn how to handle a lance, a mace, a sword, a shield, all that kind of stuff. And after about 7 years of that, then you become a warrior. You don't necessarily become a knight. The way you really become a knight is when the king goes, and you are knighted, okay, to be a sir. So, you get all these this long passage to describe him. And we're told, let's see here. Pick up with line 70. He never yet no villainy never said. He never yet no villainy nay said. You have a triple negative. Doesn't Chaucer know grammar? Because you're not supposed to use a double negative, right? I used to tell one of my teachers I don't know no better. And she'd always get angry at me.
I don't know no better.
Because a double negative is supposed to mean what?
Positive.
It cancels each other out because it's positive.
In English.
No,
What?
in math. That rule comes from an 18th century mathematician who applied it to the English language. Completely ridiculous and idiocy. Chaucer uses triple negatives. Shakespeare uses double negatives regularly. Frankly.
Spanish still uses double negatives.
Okay. Who is anybody to tell Shakespeare how to write? I mean, just. So. He never yet, no villainy, never said. Why is he using a triple negative?
Never emphasize the negative.
To emphasize. Okay? It's emphasizing. He never said anything villainous, anything wrong, anything bad.
Yet.
In all his life, unto no manner of person. Yeah, the yet doesn't mean but he's going to. Okay? He was a very perfect, gentle, or noble knight. This guy's cream of the crop. And everybody thought so until, what year? 1970? 1977? I can't remember the exact year. Early 70s, when, why is there no eraser here? When a scholar named Terry Jones wrote a book called Chaucer's Knigget. Anybody know who Terry Jones is? There's a reason I said Knigget. Monty Python. He's one of the original Monty Python members. He was also a medieval scholar. That's why, if you watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's really good. Because they knew the material so well. Okay? Terry Jones in Chaucer's Knight argues, and very few people accept this thesis, but I always throw it out there just because I want to make things interesting. He argues Chaucer's Knight was not such a great guy. And that what Chaucer is doing by listing all these battles is he's showing this guy was a bloodthirsty mercenary. Because a lot of these battles were not against quote-unquote heathens. They were against other Christians. He was fighting other Christians. Not something Christians are supposed to do. Okay? So, he's told us who he is. He's told us his character. What has he not told us yet? How he's dressed. So he's going to tell us that now. But for to tell you of his array, his horse were in good. Were in, that's plural. He has more than one horse. So why isn't it his horses were in good? Because horse in Chaucer's day was like the word, it's not really anymore, I hate to say that. It's like the word deer today or fish today. Fish is what? Both singular and plural. Deer is both singular and plural. You don't say, look, I see 2 deers. It's bad English. Okay? And unless you're Gollum, you don't talk about fishes. It's fish. Okay? Horse had both plural and singular. So, his horse were good, but he was not finely dressed. Well, why not? I mean, he's getting ready to go to a saint shrine. He should be dressed to the nines, right? No. Of rough cloth, fustian, he wore a tunic, all besmuttered, soiled, with his habergeon, his mailcoat, for he was what? Late come from his voyage. He just got off the boat. The boat came up the Thames. He stepped off the boat. He walked to the Tabard. Where did he just come from? His latest slaughtering. Wherever he was last at war. So, his tunic and everything are soiled. Blood, sweat, and tears, probably. A bit of mud. With him is his son, squire, a lover, and a lusty bachelor. Notice, lusty, your gloss tells you vigorous. Apply vigorous to bachelor. What does that really mean? How can you be a vigorous bachelor? Vigorous, implies you really try hard. How do you really try hard to be a bachelor? Lusty implies loving life. I mean, he lives. He's not somebody closeted up in a room somewhere. He's out and about in town. Okay? What else about him? With locks curl, but your gloss tells you curl means curled. So why didn't Chaucer say locks curled? He did. The C-R-U-L-L and C-U-R-L, it's the same word. What's different? It's called metathesis. Okay? Chaucer's day, in the Parliament of Fowls, he has a line that says something about the Britta. It's the third bird. This is the original spelling and pronunciation. The R came before those vowels. But during the late Middle Ages, it reverses for some reason. We don't know why. Okay.
So much more sense.
The Old English, the word for burnt. Bryn. It's burn. R-E rather than U-R. Okay? Again, it's one of those weird things in the history of the English language. We don't know why this happens, but they flip. So, he's got curly hair as though they were laid in a press. Like he puts his curlers in at night. So what does this tell us about this squire?
He cares about his locks.
Cares about his locks, thank you. And, change the vowel, his looks. 20 years old. Stature, he's of a moderate height. He's quick, he's strong. He had sometimes been in chevauchée, that is in a cavalry expedition, where Flanders, Artois, Picardy, that is, he's been to France. Okay? He hasn't necessarily been to Africa and other places like his father. And let's see here. Carries himself so well, he won his lady's grace or favor. We get a description of his clothing. His gown is short, sleeves long and wide. He could sit on his horse and ride fairly. He knows how to sing songs. He knows how to write. Okay? He knows how to joust. He knows how to dance. And he knows how to draw and write. Why does Chaucer tell us that?
He's educated.
He's educated. What else? Those are all qualities of the ideal knight. The ideal knight isn't just somebody who goes out and bashes heads. The ideal knight is somebody who can bash a head and then come inside and sing a song, or write a poem, or dance well. Okay? If you've ever seen A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger and what's her name? The more I think about it, and the more I watch it, and I've not seen it for several years, it really captures Chaucer well. Because, what marks William Thatcher? Can he sing? Not really. Can he dance? No. He's got to have one of his buddies teach him how to, the armorer woman teaches him how to dance. Can he write? No, he's no good with words. Who does his words for him? Chaucer does. Okay? So Chaucer turns him into this squire who becomes, what's this character's name? Ulrich von Liechtenstein. A real person who wrote a book on knighthood, on how to be a knight and win lovers. Real historical character. Did win actual jousts, we know. Because the whole thing about the jousting, like world championships. Okay, they didn't have world championships, but they did have regularly jousting festivals and matches, like going to a, baseball game today. Okay? What else? We're told, so hotly he loved that by nighttime he hardly ever slept. Then does a nightingale. In other words, this guy's busy at night. Courteous he was, humble, helpful. How do we know he was helpful? Because he carved before his father at table. That is, he served his father at the table. He carved the roast beast, in Whoville. Okay? What else? He has a yeoman. So the knight has his squire, his son. The son has a yeoman, okay, and no other servants. And the yeoman is clad all in green, has peacock arrows, knows woodcraft and all that kind of stuff, bears a horn. I'm not going to talk about the yeoman much, or anymore, frankly. We're going to the nun, a prioress. Now, what's the difference between a nun and a prioress?
Nun is like higher. No, I'm sorry. No. Prioress is higher up.
The prioress is like an abbot or an abbess. Think Abbess Hild. Okay? Hild was a prioress. She's the person in charge of the priory, which is the place where the nuns live. So a nun, and then Chaucer expands that. She's a prioress. She is one of the, other than Chaucer, one of the three pilgrims that is actually named. Three? Eglantine, Friar Hubert, and... No, it might just be two. Okay? Of her smiling, she was full simple and coy. Her greatest oath was, oh, St. Loy. Okay, and you got a footnote there about St. Loy. St. Eligius, if you ever watched the old TV series, St. Elsewhere, this is the St. Eligius that the hospital is named after. Okay? Bishop of Noyon, France, patron saint of both goldsmiths and blacksmiths. So, by St. Loy, she was called Madame Eglantine. Kind of rose. Full well she sung the service divine, that is matins and mass, intuned in her nose full seemly. What does that mean, intuned or intoned? In her nose full seemly. Fran Drescher, the nanny, she sings like this. She forces the air not out of her mouth, but she forces it to go up into her navel cavity first into her nasal cavity and then out. So by saying that she intuned it through her nose, Chaucer is saying like, not pleasant singing. Okay? French she spoke full fair and elegantly, or fetishly. That's what the fetishly is. How? After the school of Stratford and Bow. Well, what's the school of Stratford and Bow? She doesn't speak French like a Parisian.
Norman French.
She doesn't speak French like a Norman. She speaks French how? I'm going to use my favorite, and I don't mean to, cast aspersions on anybody from there, like a Woodburyan. Parlez-vous français? That's how. She doesn't speak proper French or good French. Why? Because French of Paris was to her unknown. She taught the French. She was taught where? At Stratford and Bow. Not in Paris. You really want to learn a foreign language? And which I strongly take a foreign language if you haven't, take one, start it, get it under your belt. Learn that foreign language and then go to that place where that foreign language is spoken and live there. That's when you'll learn that foreign language. Okay? So, unless it's Latin, because then you're screwed. Unless you can come up with a TARDIS, call me. So, what else are we told about her? At meat, that is at dinner. Well taught was she withal. What does that mean? She was taught well at dinner.
Manners.
Table manners. She's got good manners. She's like a Petunia Dursley. She knows how to eat well. So, how do we know? She let no morsel from her lips fall. That's a mark of good manners. Eating so that food doesn't dribble out of your mouth while you're eating. Okay? What else? Well, could she carry a morsel, that is, from the plate to her mouth?
No sauce. Wet her fingers.
Right. She let no morsel from her lips fall, nor wet her fingers in her sauce deep. What sauce? Have any of you ever had
Gravy.
roast beef? Au jus? Roast beef sandwich, and you get a little pot of gravy there, and you dip it. That's what they're talking about. Okay? She doesn't. It's not finger looking good, in other words. What else? Nor does she let it drop on her breast. That is, the stuff she dips in, she doesn't need a bib. Okay? In courtesy was set for module her list. That is, was set entirely her pleasure. She wants to emphasize what? She knows good manners. Her overlip wiped she so clean. Overlip, that's this one. So that when she took a drink from her cup, there was no farthing seen, no coin-sized spot of grease when she drunk had her draught. So when she takes a drink from a cup, she doesn't leave any marks from her lips on it. What else? Full seemly after her meat she reached. That doesn't mean she reaches 3 people over to grab a, bird leg or something. And surely she was of noble disport, or great disport, if you want her, geniality, full pleasant, amiable of port or bearing, pain for the counterfeit cheer of court, manners of court. She liked to emulate. She's kind of like those poor slobs at Bertilac's castle, right? Sir Gawain shows up and they go, hot damn, now we're going to learn how to speak well and eat well and all those things. She wants to be what? Like a woman at court. What's her job? What's her avocation, her calling out?
She's a nun.
She's a nun. supposedly, what do nuns say when they become nuns? What vows do they take? Just like monks. Poverty, chastity, and what else?
Then they're going to say a virgin.
Silence. Yeah, that's the chastity part. Okay. Are they supposed to care for these kinds of things? Courtesy and manners are what? They're of the world. Those are secular ideals. Okay? She also likes to be held, line 141, dine of reverence. Worthy of reverence. She wants people to do what to her?
Praise her.
Yeah. She wants people to look up to her, to think highly of her. What does that go against? What is a virtue, so to speak, of quote-unquote Christianity? Humility. Where's her humility? Out the window. Okay. What else? She doesn't like if anybody hurts her dogs or a mouse. In fact, talking about her dogs, how does she feed her animals? What does she feed her animals? We're told, 146.
Meat, milk, and bread.
Of small hounds had she that she fed with roasted flesh or milk, and not just bread, wastrel bread. What's wastrel bread?
White bread.
It's white bread. We think of white bread as what? It's not as good. But white bread in Chaucer's day, that's the really good stuff. Because the brown bread, the wheat bread that we today say is, so much healthier. Yeah, well, in Chaucer's day, the wheat bread wasn't ground as finely as the white bread. So you would get wheat husks in the bread. Okay? Chewy stuff that could break your teeth. She feeds the expensive stuff to her dogs. But sore she wept if any of them, her animals, were dead, or if men smote it with a yardstick smartly. She was of conscience and tender heart, full seemly her wimple, that is her habit, pinched was. Her nose was shapely, her eyes gray as glass, her mouth small, soft, red. Red kind of implies she wears what?
Lots.
Yes, they did have it back then. Lipstick. But certainly, she had a fair forehead. So, small eyes, small nose, nice lips, broad forehead. What it usually describes as, well, we're going to be told, how broad? A span broad, almost. What's a span? From here to here. Yeah, Jamie gave me the perfect look, so did Yvonne. Like, what a freak, because her head is like Conehead. Old Saturday Night Live, if you're familiar with Coneheads, okay? For hardly she was not undergrown. That might mean this is a big woman. Hardly she was not undergrown. She's not small, right?
I mean, she knows good table manners, so.
She has coral around her arm. What is that? Like a bracelet. She's a nun. If she has anything around her bracelet, it should be something like this. This is a little prayer rope. She should have like a rosary. What else? She doesn't stop there. Okay? Thereon hung a brooch of gold full sheen, on which there was first writ a crowned A, that is an A with a crown on top of it. And after, like below the A, amor vincit omnia. Amor vincit omnia. Not caritas vincit omnia. Amor is what kind of love? Romantic love. Romantic love, vincit, conquers omnia. All. Caritas, that's charitable love. That's brotherly love. Okay? It's also not eros, erotic, sexual love. But the romantic part leads to that. She's a nun. What should a nun be having to do with romantic love? Absolutely nothing. So what has Chaucer just done?
She's a hypocrite.
She's a hypocrite. Okay? See, Chaucer does this in the general prologue. He gives us descriptions of everybody, and yet in each description, or in the descriptions of most of the characters, I won't say it's all, he does a little undercutting. He describes them as being kind of the best of their class, or rank, or estate, and then he undercuts. Notice, she's the top of the clergy that are there, because she's a prioress. But he undercuts her by showing her to be what? What does she place her values in? What does she emphasize?
The material world.
The secular world.
Kind of makes credence to the knight being a bloodthirsty mercenary.
Well, and that's probably one of the reasons why Jones started to do the research that led him to think, because a lot of scholars say he's wrong about those battles. Okay? To let him to think, well, because most people do say Chaucer does kind of undercut these characters this way. 2, however, it's clear there's no undercutting at all. Let me put it this way. At least 2. But those 2, it's emphatic. These guys, they're not perfect, but they're the perfect exemplars of their role. I'll tell you who they are. The parson and his brother, the plowman. They're the lowest 2 levels. They're the lowest 2 members in this group of 30. The parson is a poor country priest, and his brother is a ditch digger. You don't get any lower than that. Okay? So who do we meet next? A monk. Notice, another member of the clergy. And if it's not clear, when you go back and reread the general prologue, you will see it clear. Chaucer takes special aim at the church. There's problems with these people. Why? Because in the late 14th century, there were problems in the church. Quote unquote, bishops, prelates, priests, etc. weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. Chaucer isn't the first person to write about it. Another Middle English poet, John Gower, writes about it. William Langland, who I put up here on the board the other day, Piers Plowman. The full field, fair field full of folk found I there, that line comes from Piers Plowman. He's ripping the church apart, okay, in his writing. He's not starting a reformation. We'll talk about that later. So we get the monk. We get a long description of the monk, okay? Know this description, and I'll tell you who specifically to know from the general prologue. But what do we hear about this monk? What does he think about the monk's vows? Poverty, chastity, humility, silence, etc. He doesn't care for those. In fact, he even thinks, line 175, let's say. No, let me back up. 173. The rule of St. Mar, or St. Bennet, that is Benedict, and Mar is St. Maurice, okay? That is the monastic rule, the orders, the laws that they are to follow if you're in one of those religious orders, because that it was old and somewhat, I don't know why they put restrictive, because straight means exactly what it is. Straight. What happens when somebody goes crazy? You have to call the guy in the white suits. What do you get put in?
A straitjacket.
Okay. You don't call that a restrictive jacket. So, because their rules, their laws, are old and straight, this same monk let old things go. I don't hold to that old-fashioned belief system, and held after the new world of the space or the course. Well, what's the New World's space or course? He gave not of that text a polled hen, that is plucked hen, that says that hunters are not holy men. Well, that's one of St. Benedict's rules. If you're going to be a monk, you can't hunt. Why? Because monks shouldn't kill anything. Period. And they should be vegetarians. Okay?
Well, then what about the plants? They're living creatures too, right?
Yeah, but they're vegetable. They're not sentient like animals are, supposedly. Well, there are some biologists, botanists today who say, trees, no. Trees, you're like, and they're like, you know.
They can feel pain too, actually.
Yeah. So, nor that a monk, when he is reckless, your gloss tells you negligent, but that word is really reckless, careless, not thinking, is like to a fish that is waterless, fish out of water. He doesn't like that saying either. That's to say, a monk out of his cloister. A monk out of his cloister is like a fish out of water. This monk, not me. I like being out of my cloister. This same text he held not worth an oyster. And I said his opinion was good. Notice the I there. Who is that? Who?
Is it Chaucer?
Which Chaucer? You're right, it is. It's the character. It's the persona Chaucer that Chaucer, the author, creates as the teller, the general teller of the tales. The I is not Chaucer the writer. Because when Chaucer, the character, tells a tale, he's an idiot. And Chaucer, the author, obviously is not. Okay? And so Chaucer goes, and I said, good for him, you know. Why should he study and make himself mad? Why should he pore over the scriptures and, make himself go crazy? Upon a book in cloister always to pore, or to work with his hands in labor. There's a Latin phrase, ora et labora. Ora, prayer and labor. That's what monks are supposed to do. That's what monks do today. They work with their hands and they go to prayer. Right? Or nuns. Why? Chaucer says. As Austin, St. Augustine, bid, how shall the world be served? What good does that do to the world? To have some guy over at some monastery tilling his little garden and going to prayers several times a day. What good does that do for the world? That's what Chaucer's asking there. That's not what the monk asks. Right? Now, let Austin, St. Augustine, have his own work to him reserved. Therefore he was a prickaseur all right. Prickaseur, hard rider. That is, he's got several horses also. And he likes to really ride them. He also has greyhounds. Not the monastery has greyhounds. He has greyhounds. Right? Hunting hounds. For riding and hunting for the hare was all his lust, that is, his pleasure. So we then get a description. So we've had his character. Now we get a description of how he's dressed. Okay? His sleeves were lined at the hand with grease, expensive gray fur, and the finest in the land. I've read some editions where it's suggested that's squirrel fur. Right? Under his chin, to fasten his hood, he has what? He has a gold pin. A love knot. That is, it is a symbol of love. His head is bald, shone as any glass. Also his face looks like it had been anointed. What does that mean? His face looks like it had been anointed. Anointed with what? Not holy water, holy oil. He's got a greasy face. He was a lord full, fat, and good point. That is big, man. His eyes were steep. Your gloss tells you bright and rolling in his head. Other glosses don't say bright. Any of you remember the character, the actor Marty Feldman? Young Frankenstein, okay? He could make this eye go this way and this eye go this way. Or this eye go this way and this eye go this way. Really weird. But he had buggy eyes. Okay, Frodo in the Lord of the Rings films. What's the actor's name? Elijah Wood. Bug eyes. He's got bug eyes. Big eyes. And we're told what? Rolling in his head. So, greasy skin, eyes rolling. His head, we're told, steamed as a furnace of a lead or lead. His boots were supple, his horse best shape. He's a fair prod. He was not pale as a forepined ghost. Pining ghost.
He got sunlight.
Why does he say he was not like this? Because that's what monks should be like. Monks should be pale and thin. Why? Because they shouldn't eat a lot. This guy falls under what of the 7 deadly sins?
Gluttony.
How do we know? A fat swan loved he best of any roast. Okay, now you need to know who could eat swans in the Middle Ages?
The nobles.
Royalty. Every swan, all swans belong to the king. All swans belong to the king or queen. And they were all marked for that very reason. The only way you could eat a swan is if you had royal permission. We're not told anything there. Okay?
Is swan delicious?
I have no idea. I've never eaten any.
Tastes like chicken.
Yeah, everything does. So does rattlesnake, apparently.
Birds,
So, we then have a friar. So, the nun's prioress, the monk, now the friar, who's going to be named Hubert. Okay? We've got 5 minutes. And what are we told about this friar? He is a wanton and a merry. Your gloss wanton tells you pleasure seeking. What kind of pleasure? If somebody is described as a wanton, it means they're sexually loose.
Oh,
Okay? Promiscuous. It doesn't just mean, hey, he's out there to have a good time. He's out there to have a good time. A limiter, in your gloss tells you, that is somebody who is licensed to preach in a very specific area, like maybe a county, maybe a town, or a shire or a town. A solemn man, imposing. It doesn't mean he walks around with a sour look on his face all the time. It means this is a big hulking guy. Not big hulking like Falstaff. Big guy, tall, powerful. Okay? In all the orders 4, that is the 4 orders of monks, is none that knows so much of dalliance and fair language. Dalliance. Your gloss tells you flirtation. I think it's a little bit more than that because of some lines that are coming up. He made full many a marriage of young women at his own cost. Okay? That means he paid for many young women to get married. Why are you nodding your head there?
I'm pregnant.
Yep. Or he, I was going to create a word, de-virginized them. He slept with them, took away their virginity. So, unto his order, he was a noble post. Now, and the older I get, the more I think, maybe I'm the only one with a dirty mind. Because I don't think Chaucer means there, he's a noble post, like he's a post standing up, like a foundation of the order.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. It's Freudian. It's a phallic image. Unto his order, Well, his order, yeah, literally it means his monastic order, but I think there's another order implied here. This guy's real order, women. He was a noble post. And well beloved and familiar was he with Franklin's ever all throughout the country. What else? And with worthy women of the town. Worthy women. Not women of the street, prostitutes. Not peasant women. Women with what?
Money.
Why? Because he had power of confession. What does power of confession mean? He can forgive their sins. As he himself said, more than a curate, that is more than a local priest. Why? Because he was licensed, and sweetly heard he confession. How sweetly and pleasant was his absolution. Confession, absolution, penance. They're the three things that go together with confession. You confess, you're absolved, then you do penance. Don't do that again. Or go say however many prayers, etc. Well, what kind of penance did he give? He was an easy man to give penance, thereas he knew to have a good pittance. That is, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I'll give you an easy penance, you write me a check. Could be, I'll give you an easy penance, and it's me. I'm the easy penance. For unto an poor order for to give is sign that a man is well shriv. That is, you show you are really absolved, that you're really contrite, if you write a good check to that church. Is that any different from a lot of televangelists today? Show how much you love Jesus. How? Gimme. That's what got Jim Baker in trouble, and half the other guys back in the 70s and 80s. Okay, we're out of time, so we will stop there. It's not that he doesn't like the church, it's that he doesn't like hypocrites. Will we have a quiz on Thursday? That is a good question. No, you had one today. Don't forget lines to remember. 2 people have done it so far.
Anyone
Something from
absolutely
Shakespeare be
do.
fun?
It's on the syllabus. It's got to be before the last day of class, I believe. Close question?
Would something from Shakespeare be fun?
Yeah,
I'm thinking about doing the St. Christmas Day speech.
that would be fine.
Would next Thursday be fun?
Yeah, just come to office hours.
All right.
Okay. I don't know what I want to do yet.
It's good to give you something.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Yep.
Bye.
I did stop that, didn't I?